Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks, and welcome to another fun filled, action packed, and intellectually stimulating edition of This Week in Weather. I'm your host and meteorologist, DT from weatherist.com, the commander of chaos, the colonel of confusion, the captain of catastrophe. It's time to talk about this week in weather for this Sunday evening, almost midnight here, going into Labor Day, a Monday. And we'll start out by talking, of course, tropical storm Hermine and what went wrong with it. We'll talk about my forecast, the consensus forecast, NHC forecast, where all the models busted. So that's going to be a bit of a topic here. Then we'll talk about the warm pattern returning to the eastern United States, but it looks kind of wet over the Midwest. And then we'll be talking about signs the second half of September will turn colder, especially over the Midwest, and maybe getting cooler temperatures into the East Coast. So let's get right to it. All right. The argument's been made that the European model busted and the GFS did not. And of course, what I'm going to talk about here is why that's bullshit. Now, this is the GFS model from September 1st, which is Thursday. This is the 6Z run. And you can see now early on the GFS had the system much further east. That's true. But once we got closer to the event, the GFS model turned towards the European on several different model runs. And we can see this very clearly. Now, on this particular run, the GFS had a fairly moderate solution. Notice it brings it up here on Saturday afternoon, that it has it off the I guess that's Wallops Island in the lower Virginia Eastern Shore. It's still there Sunday morning, and then it hooks it back a little bit to the coast. You can see there on Sunday morning at 8 a.m. driving the rains into southern New Jersey, the Delmarva back into D.C., northern Virginia, northeast Virginia, and then Monday it's still there, and you can see the little hook on the purple dot. So the GFS still had this scenario, and that's what people need to keep in mind. Now, this was the Thursday afternoon European run, and you can clearly see that the model is very aggressive with this developing system with Hermine. It takes it as a half nor'easter, half tropical storm, and then because it brings it over the Gulf Stream, which is in this general area, the system intensifies. You can see the hook very clearly here from the previous position. And look at the purples and the red. That's heavy rain getting driven back into New Jersey, towards New York City, into Ocean City, Maryland, all the Delmarva, the Chesapeake Bay, into southern Maryland, and of course northeastern Virginia as well. And that's a lot of wind there, obviously, especially on the Delmarva and southern New Jersey coast. So the European was very aggressive with this, but it wasn't the only model doing that. And that's what people need to keep in mind. Now, this is the winds from the European model. You can see it very strong. Now, these browns, now these winds are 10 meters above the ground on the European model. Again, this is for the Thursday afternoon run. Valid 10 meters, which is about 50 feet above the ground. So these are pretty close to surface winds, but not exactly surface winds. And the brown color here, in case you're missing, that's 75 knots. That's a lot of wind. And then now Sunday morning, it rotates it off the coast. You can see here, and it does it like that. But it still has that hook, and that's what I was worried about. That's what everybody was worried about. So the scenario was that Hermine was going to stall over the Gulf Stream. And that would lead to number two. It would regain tropical characteristics and become a hurricane. And that would lead to number three, which it would turn Hermine back to the west for at least 12, maybe as much as 24 hours, bringing it close to the far southern tip of New Jersey and the Delmarva Peninsula. That was the scenario that I and other people were looking at. Now, this was the GFS for Friday afternoon, the evening 18Z run. And again, a lot of the TV stations, everybody else saw this around 6 p.m. when it came out. And you can see this is valid Sunday night, Monday morning. Now, the GFS is not as close to the coast as the other models. That's true. But it still has very strong winds here. These are winds at 850. And the purple represents, 80 knots. 75, 80 knots. And you can see the different areas here. Area A, Area B, Area C. And, Area B is clearly showing 70, 75 knot winds at 5,000 feet, which is 850 millibars, which is around 53 or 60 miles per hour. So at the surface, you can estimate that as a pretty reasonable, idea of what was going to happen. So this is very aggressive. This is a very dangerous scenario. Not as close to the coast as the European, that's true. But simply to say that GFS had to store much further off the coast and no impact on the coast, it's wrong. It's not accurate. This is the 12Z GFS, which came out. This is also on the 18Z run, as you can see, I should say, the 12Z and the 18Z run. Now, a comparison. Notice here what's going on. The let me, in fact, what I'll do is I'll call up this box here. Here is the center of the position on the 12Z run. All right, 12Z run right here. See how far off the coast it is. There's New York City right here. You can see it's on the edge of the map. Now this is the 18Z run, and again it's further west. And it looks like it's rotating back to the coast. So again, GFS did have the system. All right, now the NAM also was one of the models that was furthest east, and obviously you don't want to use the NAM this far out. It's 48, 60 hours, and it's also a tropical system. But just to show you the trend here, this was the NAM from, I guess this is from Friday afternoon, and this is the on the left, as you can see, and there's the system right here. Let me highlight, you can see where it is. There's the low. Now there's Cape Cod, okay? You see it's right along of Cape Cod around 69 longitude. Now for Saturday, this was the new run which came out late Friday night, Saturday morning, also valid 2 a.m. Monday, valid the exact same time frame. And look what it does. Now we'll look where the low is, almost due south of New York City, headed towards the Delmarva coast. And you can see the winds at 900 millibars, which is 3,000 feet up, are around 80, 85 knots, 80 knots, which is very impressive. That's clearly a hurricane. There's no doubt about it. The system has re-intensified. So even the GF even the 18Z NAM, the previous NAM models on Friday had now shifted toward the west solution. And that's one of the reasons why the storm tide forecast, this is for Atlantic City on the left and Cape May, New Jersey on the right. You can see how impressive the storm tide was. The models were forecasting the storm tide to be. This would be historically record smashing or at least record tying storm surge. That's what these indicate. You can clearly see it right here at almost 9 feet. I mean, look at this. And this is 8 feet at Atlantic City and Ocean City, Maryland. I don't have that one here, but it was showing the same sort of thing. So a lot of damage. This is one of the reasons why people were really pounding on the storm tide. Now, this was the hurricane forecast, 5 a.m. on Friday. Notice what the Hurricane Center is doing. This is very reasonable. They go more with the GFS as than the European, and they swing it out like this. You see it? Look how far it is. Now, that's fine. That's a viable scenario. But here is the new one at 5 p.m. And you can clearly see that the Hurricane Center is now concerned about the hook and the stall. Okay, vastly different, not all the way through Monday afternoon off the Delmarva coast, southeast of Atlantic City, due east of Ocean City, Maryland. Clearly, the Hurricane Center was following the same idea. And now this is Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Now, what actually happened? Well, here's the picture Saturday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You can see the low-level center very clearly here. And just to highlight the coast, this is the coast of New Jersey. You can see it like this. There's New York City, there's Long Island, and here's the Delmarva, just down like this. Okay, so it's odd to see. That's about where it should have been. That wasn't a problem. You can see the low-level center. But then the system continued to slide to the east, and it never stalled. Now, this is Sunday afternoon, 1 o'clock on today, actually yesterday. But Sunday afternoon, you can see the center is now well to the east of 70 degrees longitude. I mean, it's out there, folks. It's 69, maybe 68 degrees longitude. Where was the GFS model on Saturday morning? Saturday morning had the system, as you can see, much closer to the coast. All the models had it wrong, all of them. Not just one or the other. It was a complete miss at all different areas. And you can see the latest picture here, late Sunday evening. The thing is still booking. It still hasn't stalled. It hasn't rotated to the west. It's still going due east-northeast, not due east, but east-northeast out to sea. It's now at 68 degrees longitude. So it's still moving. It has not stalled and did not turn back to the west. And it has not re-intensified into a hurricane. So what did we do wrong here? Well, we used a lot of inductive thinking. We used probability as opposed to actual scenario building. That was a mistake. We engaged in begging the question. In other words, we assumed that all the model stall was a fact, and therefore, if it stalled, it would be over the Gulf Stream. And if it was over the Gulf Stream, it would become a hurricane, which would hook it back to the west. So we just assumed that the conclusion was valid. We never checked the conclusion as being valid. We never thought about what could go wrong here, and of course we were involved in groupthink like everybody else was. So that's what we did wrong, and we have to learn a lesson here. I think if this had not been if this had been a typical East Coast hurricane instead of a hook, I think the models would have done a lot better. In any event, let's see what else is going on here. This here is the next system, the next tropical disturbance in the tropical Atlantic entering the Leeward Islands. It's 92L. It looks fairly decent right now. If we go zoom in on it, you can see it's got a nice ball convection there, a little bit of a feeder band coming in from the Caribbean, wrapping into the system. But if you look at it, the long term, over the next, well, not short term, over the next 2 or 3 days, huge amount of incredible shear here. So this system is going to die. This blue stuff here, this is all shear. You see it right here. This is all heavy, heavy shear. So it's not going to make it. The shear will kill this system, I'm pretty certain. So now we look at the 1 to 5 day. We can see the pattern here. There's a big, deep, persistent trough right in this area here, pushing down from Canada. There's our vortex, very strong there. We have the ridge, a bit of a dome here. So everything going up this way. And that's a very warm pattern for this time of year. And we can see that that's going to continue. These are our temperatures for the next 5 days, very warm. And if we look at the actual readings, this is the max temperatures valid for Wednesday afternoon, mid 90s in a lot of Virginia, if that's right. This is for Thursday, more the same thing, even upper 90s in some areas. I happen to think these are all overdone. I don't think they'll be that hot, but it's a warm pattern. And even into the weekend, it might be another really good beach weekend, even though it's after Labor Day. If you look at the rainfall, a lot of rain over the Midwest, not much over the eastern Mid-Atlantic, New England states, as you can see. And if we look at the rainfall anomalies, very dry here. In the Mid-Atlantic, Tennessee Valley, Deep South, and really much above normal rain in the Dakotas and the upper Midwest. All right, we're going into the 6 to 10 day. Same sort of thing. The ridge comes down a little bit. You can see the ridge is trying to weaken. The trough is trying to come southward a little bit. A little bit of a ridging here. You can see that. And it's trying to drive the trough a little further down into the mid-Atlantic, so it's a little cooler here. But that vortex is still way up here in northwest Canada, which is not a good position. And this up here is upper low, so we still have a positive NAO, as you can see here. So it's a little cooler, but not a dramatically cooler pattern. Much cooler in the Midwest, though. And if we look at a rainfall anomaly, still pretty wet in the Midwest. Temperatures cooling down in the Dakotas, in the upper plains, still quite warm over the deep south and the east coast here. Still a mild pattern into mid-September. And then the rainfall anomaly is still very strong over Canada, all the central and upper plains, the Midwest here, which is going to interfere with the harvest there for those that trade grains. And then if we look 11 to 15 day, this is a cooler pattern, not really cool on the east coast, but it's not as warm as what we're going to see over the next 5 days. We can see our ridge is still a ridges here, and we still have a bit of a ridge off the southeast coast, but we still have a kind of a trough here. Nothing to write home the mom about, but it's definitely a little cooler than maybe close to normal temperatures over the mid-Atlantic, maybe, or just a slight bias to the warm side. And you can see here the temperatures a little cooler than before, still not normal, but not as much above normal. So I guess is what we're saying. And the Midwest is close to normal here. And the rainfall anomalies, it looks like we do see some good rains here in the middle of September, maybe after the 15th on the East Coast into New England. And then taking a further look out at day 15, a bleh pattern, nothing really to write home to mom about. If we go further out in time, week 3 here, our precipitation, our temperatures, notice here a pretty good shot of a cooler area here, but still warm on the East Coast and still wet on the East Coast. And then finally, we go week 4, finally getting some cooler temperatures. The warmth leaves the East Coast a little bit here. We're getting a nice shot of cool air, but still pretty dry here. And the dry, this is probably because of a trough here dropping in this way. So that's probably why the upper plains and Midwest turn dry. So maybe some hope for some cooler temperatures in week 4, but until then, still kind of a mild pattern here with a slow step down in the warm anomalies after the 10th or 15th of September. This is meteorologist DT from weatherist.com. I'll talk to you soon.